2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio, microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
All right, you have to bear with us. We're having streaming issues. This is what happens when you don't have a real studio and you have to use the internet other people let you use. Welcome to Grok Talk. I'm Steve McDonald, and we are, as always, brought to you by the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers and the bloggers at GraniteGrok.com. Check us out on Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeart, and on the Rock, NHCR.com. And, of course, GraniteGrok.com, where you may or may not be listening to our stream, depending on whether or not the internet is working or not. That's just one of the burdens that we're forced to deal with here. So, let me turn you back up. Are you good? Reboot. All right. Well, hey, reboot. Good deal. All right. Show continues. This is different. We don't usually have journalists in the studio with us, but today we do. Our next guest is a political reporter and editor for PBS NewsHour. She has been a senior correspondent on Capitol Hill with CNN, political and state house reporter with South Carolina local television, a freelance reporter. Lisa Desjardins is with us today. Hi, how you doing?
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we're glad to have you.
Yeah.
We're happy to have you. So, before we started the show, we were talking about events and coverage, and obviously you're a political reporter for PBS NewsHour. You do this all year long.
Yeah.
How do you do that? I mean, people ask me at work because they know that I'm a blogger and that I do this as a hobby. How can you stand it? It's always so depressing, or it's always this or that. And I'm like, I don't know, after a while you just kind of get used to it. Is that
I guess so. Well, I grew up in politics. I grew up in phone banks and going door to door. And I unfortunately was partial to a lot of sort of dirty tricks going on. And that made me want to become a journalist. But I think the good things that I saw in politics growing up made me want to cover it. You know, seeing the people that were able to break through and actually really that cared about what they were doing. I think that keeps you going. But I got to admit, even for someone like me who loves policy, I love covering Congress. I think even small things there can be very important. We miss a lot of the small stories that are very big. But even for me, the last few years have been tough. The last few years have been I've seen a lot of reporters just leave Capitol Hill because they don't think there's much meaning there. They don't think there's a lot of point to covering it. I still disagree, but it can be tough.
Well, when we sit down later, that's really part of that whole debate
That's
that you've been asking about, the debate between the grassroots and the Republican Party, and I think it's probably the same on the Democrat side, and it really comes down to what we like to talk about as local control, and that would pretty much be the focus of the debate. Who is in government who is protecting local control? I mean, we had a revolution because our problem was local control. We had a distant monarch who was, the perception was everything was very arbitrary. Well, it kind of feels that way now. And you have gentlemen like David, the fisherman we had on a couple weeks ago. He's just trying to fish for a living.
Yeah.
And he's got this regulatory state that's coming down on him that's going to crush his business. And everybody's like, oh, that's awful, that's awful. But yet, how did we get there from wherever? People don't seem to understand that it's a local control issue.
Over and over again, people have thought, well, there ought to be a law against whatever, and they think it's okay for government to interfere in somebody else's business, and before they know it, everybody's interfering in everybody's business through government.
Right, and it's a really interesting mix on the Hill right now, on Capitol Hill, where you have a lot of people who say they don't want to interfere in government, but then yet sometimes you see the bills they pass, and now I don't have a political stance. I sort of question both parties, but I think I've definitely noticed, I know this show has noticed, that in the past year there have been a lot of Republicans who say we're really worried about the national debt. We don't want more spending, but we saw a lot of spending get passed
Spending
by
debt,
those Republicans.
and
I think
the
that's
manner
fair
in
to
which they
question.
did it. They did it in an omnibus bill. They say,
Yeah.
well, we can't do this anymore. We need to break these out and do it by committee and do it by, department. And then they throw it all together. Well, we have to do this next time.
Yeah.
It's always next time. It's the same thing with Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire.
Yeah, they're just
we have to
kicking the
pass
can.
this, but next time, and then
And
we're at next time, and they're going to extend it again.
Right.
It's just
Or I love what you were saying about the sunsetting is not really sunsetting. That was really interesting. Yeah.
On Medicaid expansion.
Yeah.
They keep promising us that, and then we see what actually happens, and they just kick the can down the road and kick the can down the road.
Yeah, they said we'll take this federal money temporarily because it's the best deal, and we'll let it sunset. And then, of course, oh no, they wouldn't let it sunset. And before long, we'll be on the hook for a huge amount of money, as calculated by Emily.
I got a question.
Okay, yeah.
Because you said you followed the little stories. It came out
Right.
early this week, and I have yet to put it up. And it might have been Henserling or one of the folks from the Freedom Caucus
Right.
that said we have to study on after decades of Congress abdicating its power. Now they're starting to say we need to rectify that. And they want to either put a study committee together to say, how does Congress take back its power? And I'm thinking, you nitwits, either that or you're playing us for fools, because you could have done that with the omnibus and just say, we're going to use the power of the purse. But you see the Republicans, and for those listening to the show on the podcast and streaming, the Republicans say we're always those for lesser government, less expensive government, yet they're just spending more than what they did before. Now they recognize that there's a problem, that Congress has now decided that, hey, we got to take back our power. Do you get that kind of a sense?
I think Republicans have wanted to take back congressional power. I think to some Democrats too. I think when there's a Republican, if there's a Republican president and there's Democrats in the Senate, they'll suddenly want to take back congressional power too. But I think that what's happening now, just my quick take on not really knowing exactly what Henserling or whoever it was said, is that they realize that voters are not just angry, but voters are more and more taking action. And I think they need to be doing something. So this is something they think they can do, but probably doesn't have any teeth, right? It's a study. But I think they're trying to look like they're doing more. Whether they're doing more or not, we'll have to see. But they're trying to look like they're doing more, at least.
And I think you just hit it. They're trying to look like it, because we've all been saying out here, if you read the Founding Fathers' writings, one of the most abiding things about the separation of powers was that each branch would jealously, and they use that word specifically, jealously guard their privileges and power. And yet we've seen from being, instead of branch to branch to branch, we're seeing it more party to party.
Well, that's right.
And they throw away that stuff in the middle that says, this is what our fiefdom is supposed to be, don't you dare breach it. And saying, well, if the Democrats in power, the Democrats in Congress, Senate, and House will support whatever they're doing, regardless of whether it's constitutional. Republicans were guilty of that in the latter stages of George Bush's term as well. And I'm thinking, if the founders could see this now, they'd be grabbing their own assault weapons at this point. The modern sporting rifle or whatever you want to call it, and say, enough of this, off with your heads, because you've screwed it up. And do you get that sense from these nitwits?
Right. But it's interesting where you say one party or the other will oppose and try and take back power from the president, but that's a small part of the problem. The big part of the problem, dating back to at least the 1960s, is Congress passing bills that devolve most of the actual lawmaking, otherwise called rulemaking, to the agencies which they've created, because then their personal fingerprints are not on the bad stuff that happens. The only way to take this power back is to aggressively defund agencies and shrink their missions.
Yeah.
You've seen Republicans certainly start some lawsuits. Those take forever, but they are starting to sue over whether agencies can regulate in ways that they think Congress did not intend them to.
That's nuts.
That's nuts. I'm not arguing either way. Yeah,
but they don't need to do that.
Yeah.
By going
but
through,
you're saying that defunding is the way to go.
Yeah. By going through lawsuits, they're basically saying, let's put on a good kabuki theater dog and pony show. They're not doing the job that they're sent there to do. The whole thing about Congress created and Congress can destroy. gives and takes away. Congress created these agencies, these semi-autonomous agencies, which are part of the executive branch, but Congress created them in order that they didn't have to have their personal fingerprints on the bad stuff that would happen as natural consequences of housing and urban development, Equal Opportunity Commission, EPA, and so on. We're all for clean air and water, but we're not for an enormous regulatory agency that stops normal business from happening. And the only way you shut that down is for Congress to rewrite the law authorizing these much more specifically with a much smaller budget.
Would you go so far as to would you ever even envision, this is sort of a wild thought, but would you ever envision the bulk of agencies working more for Congress? We sort of evolved a system where certainly the president executes the law. But would you see rulemaking? I'm just saying in Washington's a process town, right? So somebody has to write the rules that come out of the laws. I'm wondering if you would rather those people who write the rules work for Congress than work for the president.
I disagree with the premise.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
There shouldn't be the rulemaking at all. The legislators should be doing
writing
that
the rules.
Right from the get-go. They should
yeah.
repeal the 1946 administrative rule law that gave these agencies to do this. Mike is right. They've abdicated their power and basically their
My
power
premise
and
might
their
be
purview.
exactly what you're saying, though. I'm just saying that you have 535 members of Congress. They can't write all the rules. So I'm just saying someone working for them exactly should write the rules.
No, and again,
but you're saying there shouldn't be. If they're writing more than that, they shouldn't be writing it.
They should be enforcing the law.
Okay.
Period. This
Gotcha.
administrative rule bit has gone way too far. Where now they look at the EPA. They write the rules, which is the force of law. They have their own investigators. They have their own administrative courts. They have their own administrative judges, and they have their own
police forces.
And they have SWAT teams.
Yeah. So
more
in
police
essence,
forces in Washington D.C. than anywhere else per square mile.
And is that something that there's 30 different administrative agencies now that have their own SWAT teams? Is this what the founders envisioned?
Yeah, maybe.
This is insanity.
And they don't even need those because back to David Gaithal, whose name I finally remembered.
Oh, wait.
He's just a guy fishing.
There are over 50 federal agencies with SWAT teams, and they have now become, I did some research on this, they've now become a status symbol. You're not a real federal agency unless IRS, Bureau of Land Management.
Do you guys have a SWAT team?
No.
Okay.
Well,
you
guys. Do you know what our tagline is? We are the safest podcast here in New Hampshire, and we are armed with more than just opinions.
See? That's
and
great.
we are.
You are
That's
safe
great.
here.
But to David Gaithal, they don't. NOAA doesn't need a SWAT team to crush him, to take him out of business, to take him off the board. They just need regulations. They have a SWAT team. They use the Coast Guard to enforce these laws. Yeah. But again, it's the regulatory rock that's gotten so huge that, in every congressperson in New England, Democrat or Republican, is like, this is awful.
Why does the EPA need SWAT teams? Why are there fish and wildlife agencies that need SWAT teams?
Why are they charging this way? Yeah.
Why are they breaking into a beaver dam with a SWAT team? Why are they doing this? Why are they going into a log cabin somewhere?
And I hate to use you as an example,
but you're going to.
I'm
or
going
a bear
to.
cave.
Yes, because that's how we do things
it's okay.
around
No,
here.
I get it.
And it rolled
No
off your
special
lips.
treatment.
That's great.
Yes.
Now I don't want any special treatment.
It rolled off your lips so, not carelessly, but
casually.
Casually.
Yeah.
That somebody's got to write the rules.
Okay.
And the underlying premise was, of course, the executive branch is going to write
No, remember,
the rules.
I was proposing a completely alternate premise.
No, but
so-
you still had these agencies working for Congress, and still
Well, I wasn't
writing.
suggesting they need to be agencies. I was just saying I was trying to ask who is it that puts pen to paper? Should it be someone working for Congress?
What does the Constitution say?
You know.
Who is supposed to do the legislating?
All laws shall.
But there's a legislative versus who executes, who legislates. This is exactly what I'm getting at. So what I'm trying to get is to feel what you guys would do. This is precisely the question I'm getting at.
Can we wait to answer that in about 60 seconds? All right, everybody hang on. We'll take a really short break.
Excellent. Rock.